Dear friends, dear colleagues, I would like to welcome you to this year's Air Transport Symposium. I'm really pleased that the symposium takes place in the aviation capital of the world in Montreal, and to have Sunday executives from the air transport industry from all the areas of the air transportation. And really, I would like to thank, of course, Hermès, Air Transport Organization, and also our partner GIMAS, the Groupement des Industries Marocaines Aéronautiques et Spatiales, and the Director General, Miss Maria El Filali, that represent the organization today in order to help us to organize this event. The air transport sector faces new challenges in the post-COVID-19 era. Sustainability and innovation are of crucial importance, while issues that were significant even before the pandemic, like flight delays and efficiency in the air traffic management, slot allocation rules, shortage of skilled staff, among others, re-emerge in a more complicated manner, especially as traffic is expected to recover sooner than originally planned. Unless this area of concern are properly addressed, they may end up hurting connectivity, which lies at the very heart of the air transport business. However, there are also successful examples despite these challenges. Is therefore the industry ready to face all these global connectivity challenges and ready to learn from the successful examples around the globe? The symposium today, that is entitled Global Connectivity Challenges, will host leading executives in the aviation sector. We will focus on this very issue. And I would like now to invite the President of the Council of ICAO, Salvatore Sakitano, to deliver the keynote address. Please welcome Salvatore.
Thank you very much. I understand that I have to speak loud.
Yes.
Thank you, Costa. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much for inviting me to open this symposium. Starting, of course, with congratulating and expressing appreciation to Air Transport News. As usual, Air Transport News pays a lot of attention and contribution to aviation, and organizing this event with selected people that gives the opportunity to have excellent exchanges is absolutely a great opportunity. Of course, I wish to thank very much Costas and the family of Costas that came from Athens and are living tonight. So for them has been an incredible engagement, but I appreciate very much the willingness to participate in Montreal. That is the capital of aviation. It's good today that we are talking of aviation or international transport topics positively, in the sense addressing some elements of our challenges, but putting COVID-19 behind. Let's put it in this way. Till now in our meetings we have discussed how aviation would recover from COVID-19, how could be resilient with on COVID-19. It's good that we discuss more positively, given that we have a good indication that international aviation is now recovering. Let me remind that according to our forecast, we are currently planning to reach. We are currently at 80% of 2019 globally, but we know that in some regions we have already reached 2019 or almost reached 2019. Far East still, or Asia Pacific is still in progress of recovering. So this is the reason why currently we are approximately at 80%. Our focus is that we should reach 2019 by the end of this year, and presumably to pass by 3% the traffic level of 2019. Many lessons have been learned from COVID-19. I can tell you, I will not enter into detail, but I can tell you that the organization I welcome the Secretary General that is very engaged, the Secretariat with the Council, of course, working in order to create to take benefit of the lessons learned and addressing crisis management for the future in a more effective and prepared way. In this sense, the cooperation with the WHO has been an excellent opportunity to enhance, to improve our relationships. Now, the topic is global connectivity challenges. I want to say, first of all, that the concept of connectivity is core for aviation, for ICAO, meaning that the capacity of a transport value chain to move passengers and cargo via a minimum number of transit points. And that means that they prioritize the shortest and most direct as possible a transport connection, resulting in more affordable and sustainable operations and services, greater customer satisfaction, and diminished safety and security risk. These are the elements, and these are, let's say, the value given by ICAO to connectivity as a core element for development of the transport. Challenges. There are challenges, starting from restrictive market access, poor level of national adherence to regional and multilateral agreements. I will mention something. Restrictive airline ownership, tax and fee proliferations, and also the effects of inflation of the cost of essential services delivered by airport and air navigation providers. Let's talk about the opposite, the market restrictions, but the opposite, that is liberalization. And you know how ICAO is focused in supporting liberalization. Some initiatives that are underway, for example, in Africa with the single African transport market, or in the ASEAN region, Asia Pacific, are excellent experiences. Of course, we need to make reality. Member states must understand that what are the agreements must be implemented. For example, there is an essential need that to create conditions for a single market, there should be corresponding standards, not to say the same, well-prepared development of air traffic service systems, and so on. In this sense, it's important that member states give priority to the implementation, to removing restrictions as much as possible, and implementation of liberalization concepts. One other principle that I believe is important in terms of facilitating connectivity is to extend as much as possible the approach, the one-stop security arrangements. These are contributing elements for the connectivity. We know that the connectivity or enhancement of connectivity is not just to reduce the number of transits or to have the shortest connection possible, but also to facilitate the transit. When you have more than one or even just one, and you have to repeat the security checks, it's something that, of course, is not encouraging. You cannot take this decision for granted. You have to address this issue via common standards and accepted mechanism of security implementation. ICAO is doing whatever is possible in order to support. One of the examples is that use innovation and providing states with tools. One of these is the advanced connectivity dashboard to support states in their related decision-making processes. It's a system that is going to be prepared. I will anticipate what Director of Air Transport Bureau, Mohammed Rahman, knows very well. The mechanism where with data member states can better understand how to take decisions. This is a tool that is provided to states in order to facilitate their decision making and also to address competitiveness of their own system. There is another activity that I want to stress in supporting the liberalization. One is the work in progress, currently at a technical level, on the draft convention on foreign investments in airlines, typically linked to ownership control. We perfectly know that this is a very sensitive issue, but this is an important opportunity for states to facilitate investments that sometimes are essential for the development of the national transport system. The second is the work that is in progress is a long-term vision for international transport liberalization. This is stemming from an ICAO resolution, and I'm sure that we will be able to make progress very, very soon. Now, when we talk about liberalization, we know that is a difficult topic because liberalization from one side means sometimes difficult resilience, let's put it this way, of traditional airlines. But as a matter of fact, I have to acknowledge the system currently based on bilateral air service agreement is the same that was at the base of ICAO in 1944, when airlines and states were the same. Now we are in the world where there is a clear separation between regulator or policymaker, the state of course, and the operator. In this context, the concept of liberalization is basic, and it's clear that it's difficult to remove the origin of the mechanism. And we know that in some regions there are some progress. But of course, this is not exactly what we wish to have in terms of liberalization in order to enhance connectivity. I'm not following the notes that have been prepared by the Secretariat, so at a certain point I have to check. So, Mohammed, I have to check where I am because I'm going a little bit outside at that point. No, I know. But at the end, I will have to deviate from I wish to deviate from what has been. Now, there is something else that I want to address that is not just related to connectivity itself, but is because this is an opportunity, having so qualified high-level leaders in aviation today, to say some words on what ICAO is doing and what are, in my view, the challenges and the opportunities that the aviation community must catch in order to support the development of air transport. That is sustainability. You well know the Assembly resolution on long-term aspirations goal. You will know the objective of decarbonization by 2050. This has been an achievement, a success last year. We are very proud to have achieved this after the decision taken and the commitment taken by the industry. Now member states, and I want to stress with a very large majority, adopted the resolution on decarbonization. But now we must make it reality. And this is the challenge of what is the highest priority for ICAO, to make the long-term aspirational goal a reality. How? We know that there are steps to be implemented. Technology for sure. Every new airplane of new generation replacing an old airplane contributes with the reduction of approximately 20% of CO2 emission. In perspective, we have a new propulsion or new or alternative. propulsion systems, hydrogen we see, but the short and medium term are the sustainable aviation fuels. Our priority is to promote investments in order to make affordable and accessible sustainable aviation fuels. This is our engagement for this year, following the resolution taken in 2022 on the long-term aspirational goal. We want this year to make progress on the access to sustainable aviation fuels. Access means to make it available where it is not yet available in most of the world. Africa, Latin America, Asia Pacific, including Europe, where there are many initiatives, but still we are in progress, they are in progress. In this sense, our commitment is to promote with investors, with the financial institutions, with energy company investments, and we are talking of huge investments over the world. But this is not for the benefit of the aviation itself. We know that investments means a return of investment for the investors, and there are business cases that can show that this is a benefit for the aviation and for the investors, of course. So what we want is to have by the end of this year a decision taken in the high-level conference that we are organizing in November, is the CAF3. Last conference, CAF2, was organized, President Value was there in Mexico. Then there was an engagement as a vision for 2050, again, general objective. Now we want something more concrete. If we are able to take a decision during this CAF3, and we are preparing, of course, to reach an agreement like that, we are sure that we will be able, in the context of COP28, that is immediately after, to bring another strong message that aviation is delivering, is committed and delivering in the field of CO2 emission reduction. And with this, I want to stress, concluding, that this is one of the challenges for the aviation community. We are working, and this is something not new. Let's remind that the resolutions on CO2 emission control, let's say, and at that time it was not really a reduction or reduction in absolute value, yes, that was in 2010. Now we are working, and we wanted to deliver an actual message of reduction, enhancing the use of sustainable aviation fuels, and engaging more and more and more on innovation and the new technologies. This is a challenge for ICAO, but this is a challenge for we all. It's a challenge to communicate in the proper way that aviation is delivering. The concept of flash shame is something that is surrounding sometimes in the world. It's easy to criticize aviation for emissions, for CO2 emissions, reminding that aviation contributes with 2.5% to the global CO2 emission. But it's a matter of fact, we have to do something. It's not know that we are already capping the emissions to the levels of 2019, 85% of 2019, and we plan to reduce up to zero globally in 2050. Given that this is not well known, it's a challenge for all of us to communicate better, to communicate more effectively, to communicate that aviation is delivering. And coming back, Transport News as a role, you have to take also your responsibility, Kostas, because this is a real important opportunity for this community, not to mention what is doing, what are the airlines doing, what are airports doing, what are air navigation service providers doing? Yes, we need to indicate all of them, but it's the global system that is doing and is delivering. So my invitation to all of you is really to work together to pass this kind of message that is a real message, that is just, let's say, circulating just around internally to this community. No, we have to communicate better toward the rest of the public opinion. With this, I've probably been a little bit outside the topic that was assigned, that was global connectivity challenges, but there were some other issues that are worthwhile, is worthwhile to mention. And I wish to thank very much Transport News. I thank very much Costas and his family for coming here in Montreal and for creating the opportunity of this kind of exchanges. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank Salvatore, and really message received. And Air Transport News over the last 70 years have tried to deliver to the industry. We are next to you. Then we'll continue to work together, because the aviation chain needs everyone. Otherwise, it will not be one part of the chain will broken, then it will not function properly. And that's why we try today to bring as much as possible representative of the air transport industry here in Montreal, and we'll listen shortly in the sessions. As you know, I have a dual role. Then I move to the next item of our agenda today. I'm also the Director General of Air Transport Organization, and probably you might question why we choose Bonaventure. One of the reasons is that 10 years ago, exactly on the 16th of March of 2013, was established Hermes here in the same hotel. Therefore, we said that it would be a good opportunity to get back 10 years later and being here and have this ceremony with all you personalities of the air transport industry here. For those of you who don't know, Hermes is very close collaborating with all the main stakeholders, and thanks to Bernard, Aliou, and also to Salvatore, and of course to the council, we have the observer status over the last two assemblies. And also we have MOUs of cooperation with IATA, with ERA, among others that here are representing in the highest level. Therefore, I would like to thank all of the partners that we work together. And I will ask to our president, Hermes President, Angela Gittens, to say a few words before we have a cake cut for this ceremony. Angela, be careful.
Thank you, Costas, and thank you for all who have come here. I didn't realize it was 10 years ago until we started ordering a cake. Hermes is the brainchild of Costas, true. And he and his lovely family, I don't see Evgenia here right this minute. Oh, there she is. Have toiled ceaselessly to get the membership and to get the work done so that Hermes can perform that function that Costas was talking about and that Salvatore was talking about, of getting aviation together. While we may fuss and fume among ourselves on various issues, our real interests are the same. To perform our mission safely, securely, sustainably, in a sustainable way, and be the contributors to the social and economic well-being of all the communities in the world. And Hermes plays its part. I am very proud to be part of it, and very proud to have known Costas for all these years. We all know that he is indefatigable, and I invite all of us to enjoy the cake.
Okay. Then can I invite Salvatore, Juan Carlos, Fabio, Mehmet, and Glenn to be in the picture? No, to Perfect. Okay, thank you.
If I may, I'll dispense with introductions. I think all of these panelists are well known in our industry. So let me get started. I'd like this to be fairly conversational. I have questions to pose to each of the panelists, and I think that we should have some time afterwards for a question and answer period, if possible. So let me get started. You know, as President, our council president mentioned, we're coming out of COVID. Well, at least we're coming out of COVID running our lives. We're not quite out of COVID. China is reopening, but the Far East has still not reached the traffic levels of some of the other regions. We have the Russian invasion of Ukraine that's still going on, having its impacts, and we don't know how much longer that's going to happen, but it's obviously very disturbing to all of us. So I would like our panelists to talk to us a little bit about their expectations in the short run, the rest of 2023 and into 2024. What do you think? What are you thinking in this short-term period about what's happening and what's going to happen? And Bernard, since you're sitting next to me, you get to go first.
Okay, thank you, Angela. And again, congratulations to Christas for the 10-year anniversary of Hermes. You are doing a very good job. It's a pleasure to have your family here. And Mr. President, a very nice speech. Listen, because I was in ICAO before, there will be a tendency for you to expect that I will speak from the perspective of ICAO, civil aviation sector. That is not what I'm going to do here. IPADIS will position ourselves as like an interface between the aviation industry and the civil society. And so what I will be talking about, the airlines can talk about airline, airport. I'm going to be talking to you from the perspective of what the traveling public, the consumers, will expect, what the civil society expects. So when you say, what are the, yes, we have COVID, we are coming out of COVID, the issues of the war in Ukraine, what are the expectations from the traveling public? I want to believe that they want a continuing recovery of the efforts to continue, but also for the industry to address those operational hiccups that maybe it is occasioned because the recovery is coming very quickly and you do not have the time to get the workers to return back to the industry because a lot of people left to do something else. Now you're opening up and there are operational hiccups. When people travel, they find it difficult to connect with their bags, they find it difficult to do this, to do that, and all those things. So that is one thing that I think we should expect that the industry should address very quickly. We're happy to see the industry opening up and recovering, but we also want those issues to be addressed. Secondly, we will expect, of course, that there will be increasing innovation, particularly those that affect the air transport efficiency, to make things move faster, seamless connectivity, as we talked about, and reduction in cost. There is nothing that the traveling public would like to have than reduce cost. Even when you are not making money, they want to have a reduction in cost and for air transport to be more efficient. But make no mistake about it, we've had 2 years, 3 years of a breathing space with respect to sustainability issues. Because there is reduction in flights and all that and all that concerns. Now, the next thing is, you say you achieve 80% of recovery, and you expect an increase. There is going to be, again, a focus on the impact of aviation on the environment. And there will be need to take big action And that quick action, especially exactly as you have said, Mr. President, how do you bridge the gap between what is the reality and the perception of the public will be a key issue. We mentioned about sustainable aviation fuels as being a way to go, but how do you ramp that up to short-circuit the time between development and deployment, to showcase something that people can touch, that can also touch their lives, because the public will benefit from it, because there will be a new source of revenue for the administrations, for governments and all that. They can see something they can touch positively. So I will stop that. So
But do you see, let me just go on this last one on the sustainable aviation fuels. That's obviously for aviation to use, but is it really up to aviation to get sustainable aviation fuels?
No. We're users. As a matter of fact, the ministers responsible for civil aviation have no say on the development. They are not the critical stakeholders. So how do you bridge the gap between what we see as a solution and getting states to implement those solutions? So if we continue talking among ourselves, airports to airlines and the ministers of aviation, we're getting nowhere. We have to go beyond that to get to the other decision makers in government that have to make those decisions. That's number one. The second thing is that whether you like it or not, you're talking about CAF 2 and you're going to talk about CAF 3. Whether you like it or not, for some reasons, yes, we call it sustainable aviation fuels for a reason now, but it used to be called biofuels, right? For some reason, biofuels has been given a bad name. It is impact on food security, it is impact on biodiversity, it is impact on everything. So, how does the public understand that it is beneficial not only for the environment, but it does not create other problems and other challenges? That requires a lot of enlightenment, a lot of discussion that aviation people are not positioned to do. Because if we have been very, very good in doing that, nobody will think we're the most polluter of the world. So we have to go beyond, we have to speak to a different audience to get that. Otherwise, in states, there will be a reluctance from other segments of the political sphere and the social-political sphere, blocking the development of sustainable aviation fuels.
Well, we may be getting back to that. Let me get you to have a chance on the question of what your expectations in the next year or so.
So when we look at the corona, it was a global issue, and the corona has effects on certain issues on the aviation and the whole world commercial businesses. What are those effects? First of all, the supply chain disruptions. When we look at aviation, we have new terminology. For example, if you're receiving an aircraft on time, it means that minimum 6 months delay. On time is 6 months delay. So these deferrals are causing real big problems on the aviation and in general in whole commercial business life. Then HR shortages. We face this a lot, and loss of talent, retention of the talent. Because during the corona period, what we have done, we done the easiest thing, redundant people. But aviation is the high talent requirement business. If you want to have a pilot, just a FO is required 2 years training. Or just a security check for an apron employee. A standard apron employee is 2 to 3 months. Plus the training, at least 4 months. So you can redundant them easily to save the day. But when the time comes to recovery, if you want to rehire them, sorry, you lost. And we face this as customers and as companies also during the corona periods. If you redundant the pilots, and when the business comes there, it's very hard to hire a pilot again or to train a pilot and to have them sit on the right-hand side and left-hand side. So, of course, there are some generic issues continuing, the ESG problems, the sustainability of the climate and the aviation and the SAF. SAF is good. If there's an SAF, we are sure that we're going to use the SAF. But are there enough manufacturing of SAF? And there's only one company in the globe producing SAF from waste. Rest of them are using bio, the grains. Then the ethical discussion is coming to the screen. Are we going to feed the hunger or use the grains for the sake of the climate? That's a big ethical debate which we have to. And what's going to happen? At the end of the day, if there's not enough SAF production, who's paying the bill? Through the airlines, customers are paying. Cost reduction, increase of the costs. So we have to be really clever when we are asking something for the sake of another thing. Of course, everybody, if you ask everybody on the earth, do you want to save the climate? Everybody says yes, but at the cost of what? And how? This is very important. The refugee problem is becoming important in line with uneven distribution of wealth. Especially Corona showed us that the uneven distribution of wealth is becoming a serious problem. Because during the Corona, the cake of the global business shrinked. If everybody shrinked at the same portion, no problem. But it didn't happen. Certain industries, I don't want to blame them, it was the conditions of that time, but expanded their business like e-commerce. And what happened? They took from the part of the others. And at the end of the chain, who lost it? Minimum income earners. And the differentiation point is becoming so vital, so clear and so discouraging that the number of refugees in the globe is increasing. We are hearing, especially nowadays it's going to start in the European side, that there are lots of boats coming from Africa, from Maghreb Africa towards Europe. And lots of them are going to, God forbid me, but they're going to drown. They're going to die. How come, think of it, how come you get into a journey that you have less than 50% of living? What is the motive behind this? You have nothing besides your life to lose. That's the motive. But if you go, and if you can survive to get into a Western country, what is going to happen to you is worthwhile to take that risk. The only risk you're putting down is your life. This is very crucial. And of course, everybody is benefiting from the technology. We love to look at the TikTok movies and the YouTubes, but in those episodes, people are seeing how the Western life is, what are the merits. They couldn't be able to find a piece of bread to eat, a glass of water to drink. But what's happening over there? People are having champagne baths. They are putting Swarovski on their cars, golden cars. Well, a piece of bread, a glass of water. So this uneven distribution is becoming very crucial. And finally, I would like to talk about the cybersecurity and the technological debt. Again, we have a new terminology, especially after the south winds effect in the globe, technological debt in our balance sheets, which we have to put certain contingencies, and the cybersecurity issue. And the cybersecurity issue is becoming the new cancer of the commercial life for the coming years. And if you do not have enough strong, and strong is or firewall in the technological means, is a debatable issue. The costs are enormously high, but people are finding way to sneak in. And the data is becoming very important. And aviation is one of the most attractive industries for the data resource to be attached. And what's going to happen? The costs are going to increase. On the other hand, customers are wanting cheaper prices, but the costs are increasing. This is a real oxymoron situation. So far.
Well, maybe Glenn can solve it.
Well, thank you, Angela. And let me just start by explaining a little bit about TIACA. Probably not everybody in the room knows about TIACA. We're the International Air Cargo Association. It's a trade association dedicated to the air cargo industry. It's a horizontal association, so we have members drawn from airlines, freight forwarders, trucking companies, airports, manufacturers, shippers, technology companies. Everybody associated with air cargo can effectively become a member of TIACA. The air cargo industry has had a pretty tumultuous last 4-year period, and I'll start talking briefly about 2019 to explain the start of that roller coaster. In 2019, the global economy was under severe attack. We had trade disputes between the US and China, the US and the EU and China, where there was a risk of nearshoring, rebasing production closer to point of consumption. The air cargo industry had seen yields plummet to the lowest it had been in living memory. Capacity was significantly beyond that was needed because passenger growth had been growing 10 years non-stop. So 50% of the cargo flies in the bellies. So there was far too much capacity. Then, of course, COVID came along. And it was the first time in 110 years that the entire planet knew about the air cargo industry. First of all, moving PPE around, saving lives, protecting lives. Then moving e-commerce as people could no longer go out and actually shop in the traditional fashion, so it was moving the goods they needed. Then when the vaccines came on board, it was now actually the vehicle. Nobody wanted to put a vaccine on a ship and spend 90 days for it to get to the point of injection. So air cargo was really at the height of global awareness. From an industry perspective, traditionally air cargo contributes about 12 to 15% of total revenue. In 2021, it was over 40%. As we know, the passenger aircraft's majority of them were grounded during COVID, so the air cargo industry said, we'll use those. Take the seats out. And these beautiful 787s, A350s, take the seats out, they become nice, big cargo planes. There are about 2,500 passenger aircraft being used for cargo, thanks to this man's members, and he'll talk about that in a minute. But the air cargo industry is used to taking a giant container and sticking it on a plane. When you turn up with 7,000 boxes and say, right, can you put these in the overhead compartments, in the toilets, in the galleys, under the seats, strap them in, people had never done that before, so it was the height of innovation. Then 2021 comes along. Now things are starting to open up, the consumers are getting more buoyant, things are happening. The air cargo industry has had its highest volumes ever. Everybody was looking forward to 2022. We were all predicting the greatest year ever. And then something happened in February, a little invasion took place. Energy costs started going up. The consumer started getting hit in the pocket. When the consumer starts having higher utility and energy costs, the first thing it stops is discretionary spend. So mobile phone sales went down, domestic appliances sales went down, car sales went down. The high value goods that moved in air cargo were no longer in demand. Inventory levels went up, so the demand started to decrease. Particularly at the time then as passenger business started to recover. Great, more bellies are coming along. The cargo demand is not there. We have all these freighters that we had during COVID. So the air cargo industry now is suffering from overcapacity, reducing yields, because if anything happens to the consumer. And what's also happened to the consumer, as if we heard earlier from Salvatore, is they're flying. So the limited money that they've got to spend, it's revenge travel. I couldn't fly for 4 years. I'm going on holiday. Sorry, kids, you're not going to get a new smartphone for the next 2 years. Costas is different. I see his children have the latest phones. My kids don't. I've told my kids they have to wait for their replenishment cycle. So the situation we're in with air cargo right now is we're just trying to get through this. Towards the end of this year, the inflation numbers, just the natural algorithms of the calculation, should start to see a slight reduction in inflation. Domestic housing costs, rate of mortgages, of course, is also playing heavily on the consumer. But once the consumer demand starts coming back in, then we can anticipate air cargo demand also growing. I'm sorry to say something here, but you're quite right. I agree with what you're saying about the haves and the have-nots. Air cargo actually tends to support the haves in one respect, which is moving the high value goods, but it also supports the have-nots. Air cargo is probably the most supportive mode of transport for developing nations in getting those fresh fruits, vegetables, flowers, textiles in certain parts of the world around to the consumer markets. We don't do enough telling of that story. 23 of the 25 least or poorest nations are based in Africa. Sadly, when it comes to the WTO, their policies are about creating big factories with low-paying jobs. If you go back in 10 years, you'll have the same big factories with low-paying jobs. Those policies lead towards what we would call maritime traffic rather than air cargo traffic. We need high-value goods to actually create a cascading economy, as they did in South Korea, in Japan, in Singapore, in Vietnam, Malaysia. These economies are very robust and multi-layered based on a robust economy. So air cargo, and again, I'm not going to be the first one to say this, we don't do a very good job of talking to people beyond this industry of the value that this industry brings in supporting the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and also in terms of addressing some of these fundamental basic needs. That production can happen anywhere on the planet as long as it can get to the consumer anywhere on the planet. So this year is going to be difficult and challenging probably to Q4. Beyond that, we're hopeful that the consumer discretionary spend will return in 2024 and 2025. But I've lost my hair because I've been in air cargo for so long. We don't look more than 6 months out, else we're always tripped up.
What do you think will be the impact in this fairly short term of what might be a banking crisis that will spread, that may spread?
I mean, that's a fascinating question, because you can say anything that impacts household finances impacts air cargo almost immediately. It's the first thing. As I mentioned before, the minute that finances are hit, whether or not it's energy costs, housing, mortgage rates going up, inflation, whatever it is, the pockets can only go so far. I have to cover my basic needs first, and then it's discretionary spend. That tends to be the air cargo scenario. On the plus side, there's roughly 100 million affluent middle class joining the consumption class, as it were, in Southeast Asia every year. So whilst we are seeing some of the traditional consumer bases struggling with overall financial challenges, there are 100 million people joining that sector, and it's part of when you join the consumption class, then you need to have your mobile phone, your electronic toothbrush, your flat screen TV, etc., etc. So that does help support air cargo.
Fabio, anything going on in your part of the industry?
Well, a few things, but it's quite interesting because we've heard a number of different perspectives, and I will be bringing a new perspective, but I guess the conclusions will be pretty much the same. So for those who are not familiar with the association that I'm representing, ASA, that is the association representing ground handling around the world, not only Europe. All the major ground handlers in the world are members of ASA. Well, there are a few exceptions, of course. And I must say, if there is perhaps one positive aspect of the whole program that was the result of the pandemic crisis, is that it's put ground handling somehow in the limelight, because it's something that traditionally has been occulted or not thought of, and definitely not by the passenger, and that's normal. It's not something that the passengers ever think of. Of course, you always, and all of you have been confronted to luggages being late, and leaving either the airport or the airline. You don't think that this could be, even remotely, that this could be a result of a ground handling company, which is a provider. the fact is, we were put in the limelight for, unfortunately, all the wrong reasons when things got back to, I wouldn't say, the beginning of the recovery, but certainly, you know, in 2022, things were definitely looking better. A little bit everywhere in the world, perhaps more visibly so in North America and Europe, also Oceania and a few other places. And this recovery was somehow stifled by the fact that there were disruptions. Oh, there are disruptions now. Things should be going back to normal because, as you said, Lynn, there was a revenge reason for traveling. And we don't travel because we've been not able to do that for the last 2.5 years. And then suddenly you realize that you have to queue 3 hours, 4 hours, and your flight is cancelled. Total disruptions. And funny enough, in oil stations that are traditionally known to be quite efficient. So what happens? And I think for the first time the world really realizes that, well, actually there is an intermediary between the airport and the airline. And that if this intermediary is not capable of functioning properly for the reasons that we're going to just read in a few seconds, the whole thing is not working. And I think that was a major lesson for, let's say, the aviation value chain. What happened is that, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because as professionals I think we all know what happens. But of course the very fact that the recovery was so sudden didn't allow us to hire the people that would allow the system to function. We were forced to lose up to 40% of our workforce through the midst of the crisis. 40%. We're talking of hundreds of thousands of jobs worldwide. To hire them back, it takes up to 3 months in terms of security checks, badging, all sorts. 3 months. When we get the schedule of the airlines, we normally have around 2 weeks to react. So you confront the 2 weeks of the schedule of the airline and up to 3 months. It's not always 3 months everywhere, let's not exaggerate. But on average, it's more than 2 months. And it just doesn't fit. So obviously, you have a battered capacity or a workforce, you have a sudden rise in the demands, and you're not capable of meeting the demands. Hence the disruptions. So that's one aspect of this. And it shed light on this reality. The other part of this is ground handling are the poor relations, I would say, of the air transport value chain. And I'm not saying this because I do represent their interests, obviously I am. But on top of that, there is definitely a truth in that, in the sense that we are a bit the lettuce in the sandwich. We're stuck between the airlines' service level agreements and the airport's licenses. And sometimes these SLAs and the licenses, they say things that don't match. They don't match. And we have to reconcile them somehow, because the airports are the landowners, the airlines are our customers. Right? So we have to make everyone happy. And it's not always possible, I would say easy. So that's the second aspect. And the third aspect is that, guess what? There is no regulation with respect to ground handling for a number of reasons. So we are trying to follow industry standards that are being done by ourselves, by the airlines, by the airports, by other instances. But they remain industry standard that you can bend a little bit, how you feel, how you're structured. this airport's specific configuration. And so even these standards are standards really in principle that, as I said, we can bend them very easily. You have 3 cones, you require 3 cones on this airplane. Another company for the same aircraft will require 5 or 4 or 7. And you have to serve them all, and you have to make them happy. And so it's super difficult to train your people and to explain them how to do things if each time it changes. And that's why, on top of the difficulties that I mentioned before, badging and security things, we find it so difficult to have people interested in the job. Those people who are earning the lowest salaries in the best of cases, they have to drive every day from the city to the airport, 40 kilometers. They have to work, heavy shifts, working under the rain and heat and cold. They are totally unknown, not visible to anyone. And on top of that, they see and learn that aviation is looting, it's being shamed, it's being finger-pointed. Why else would they go and work for, ground handling, or even for airports, I guess. Airports will face pretty much the same problems. They'd rather go and work for Amazon, especially during the pandemic. It was the perfect employer. So we have a structural issue here, and as of now, we're still lacking in North America and Europe about 20% of the needed workforce. So what I can predict is that in summer of this year, we're going to face yet other issues, perhaps at the same airports. I think it will be less acute though than last year because the schedules are a little bit improved, because we can foresee a little bit longer than we could in 2022. But still, there will be disruptions. I will terminate on this. I think it is really time for the legislator, with a capital L, to look at the reality of ground handling as part of the whole value chain and say, okay, well, we need to integrate this element of ground handling into the whole story of aviation. And this is an invitation and a call that I would like to pass on to ICAO and other member states of ICAO to say, I think time has come now for ground handling to be perhaps not having its own annex. That would be perhaps a step too far, but at least to be integrated somehow in the whole perception and whole approach to aviation, so that there are standards, and so that we can talk about a standardized way to do the job of ground handling.
So you mentioned North America and Europe. What about Latin America, Asia Pacific, and Africa?
It's going to be, as a matter of fact, it's interesting because the way this is being perceived there is quite different than in Europe and North America, in the sense that, first of all, working at the airports is still being perceived quite high from a societal perspective in these countries, and so it's still a good job to have there, whilst I think it's been considerably deconsidered or under-considered in Europe and North America. And in Europe and North America, obviously, the salaries or the wages involved in that, as I said, are lowest minimum salaries. I don't think it's the case in Latin America or in Africa. So people really cling to their jobs. Plus, even though the pandemic has had the same effects pretty much everywhere, there has been ways to look at this in other parts of the world. For instance, in Europe, we had the job retention scheme for a while, but it only ran for 6 months at best. And then people were simply, fired because there was no possibility for the company to continue not operating and keep them under the payroll. And that's another aspect that is interesting to note, is that the very fact that ground handling is labor intensive and not capital intensive was probably the cause of its resilience. Unfortunately, because then we could fire people, put everything on hold, and then try to rehire them, at least part of them. If we were capital intensive, I don't think we would have made it through. Because we would have invested into heavy technologies, quite expensive technologies. You're not able to make a profit on it because you cannot use it. So what do? You go bankrupt. It didn't happen. So the vast majority of ground handlers on the planet went through and showed some resilience thanks to that, unfortunately, I would say. And certainly it was no different in Latin America or Africa. But again, as I said, the perception was different. The solutions offered were different.
And so are they coming back faster in terms of being able to hire employees?
Yes, definitely. If you're posting a job in Africa or Latin America, you would have a much better response rate than you would in North America and Europe.
Michael, let's turn to you and talk about airports in the next year or so. Tell me all about airports.
So airports are capital intensive. Airports did lose staff and are slowly coming back. And this is the issue, but it's not the question that you were posing to me. The question you asked me was about COVID and about connectivity. And I think that one of the things I would say is that COVID has had some surprising effects with respect to connectivity writ large. I met Glyn through COVID. We hadn't spoken before, but we were suddenly in demand on COVID webcasts. Fabio sort of came into the ACI ambit because following COVID, following the problems with the ground handlers, following the problems at airports, we recognized that there was a need for us to be talking more closely with ASA. We saw in ICAO through the CART, the Council Aviation Recovery Task Force, that there were new ways of working, that we could get the Council, the Secretariat, industry, and others working together to resolve common problems. And the thread, I think, from this is that we do have to think about new ways of working. And as Salvatore said in his opening remarks, we've got to stop talking to ourselves. And unfortunately, this is exactly what we're doing this afternoon. So, ACI is looking beyond the talking to ourselves bit. We have got a very active program of engagement with the WTTC, the World Travel and Tourism Council. And we are working with them and with their members to keep that engagement, recognizing that airports are part of, and I will say very carefully, the aviation ecosystem, not the value chain. We are an ecosystem. We all work together to a common cause. And we need to look beyond our traditional interlocutors here. We recognize, of course, that there is a clear role and responsibility for the regulators, and that's why we work so closely with ICAO. But we also recognize that we need to look beyond aviation. We're talking to the World Economic Forum, and we are just about to launch a project which we will announce in our World Annual General Assembly in June. On airports of tomorrow. And this will be looking at airports as energy hubs rather than as simply points for aviation. We're looking to see, how do we build out so that we become valuable parts of a much broader community, so that we're able to interact and so that we're able to provide better value, best value for a global community, not just for the aviation community itself. We need to be talking to the the finance community as well, and we have a number of airports who are already advanced, and Bernard mentioned SAF. And just by the way, Bernard didn't mention it, but he was the chair of CAF 1 back in Rio de Janeiro. So a lot of this sort of progress sort of lies at the foundations that were set by Bernard and by his very strict monitoring that made that we all had to stay in the hotel and work while everybody else was outside enjoying themselves. Anyway, CAF 1, CAF 2, CAF 3. CAF 3 is going to be really important for the aviation community. And this is why we have to engage with the environment groups, with finance groups. We have to make sure that CAF 3 is a success and that we are able to take that success to COP28. Not stopping at COP28, that is a step along the way. We've got to continue promoting it, we've got to continue promoting the benefits of aviation. We talked about sustainability. We have the Aviation Benefits Beyond Borders document that we produced with the Air Transport Action Group. It has been translated then subsequently into the Aviation Benefits document from ICAO, which gets into another community. But we've got to do an awful lot more in getting this message out to a wider world. So simply, back to what I said earlier, talking to ourselves is important because it socializes all of these issues. But once we've got that socialization, then it's really important that we get out into the wider world. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but definitely not least.
Thank you. I agree with all of the comments from my colleagues. These are all, critically important trends and pushes and pulls affecting the industry in the upcoming year. It's a pretty good question. But speaking for air traffic control, I would be remiss, and everyone would expect me to talk about congestion. So I talk about congestion. We certainly expected in air traffic control, as recovery occurred, that recovery in traffic movements in the skies and number of flights and a number of flight hours was going to happen before the passenger number recovers. And that's what we're seeing. In many regions of the world, the number of flights in the skies and the number of flight hours being flown is well in excess of 2019 levels. A number of factors are driving that. One, aircraft downgauging. We have seen airlines flying the smaller vehicles in their fleet. The A380s last year, only about 50% of the world's A380s even flew last summer. We're certainly hoping to see more of them in the sky this summer, but the downgauging of aircraft meant that as passenger numbers recovered, workload for traffic controllers, congestion in the skies, and all those things were hitting 2019 levels faster. We've also seen significant trends in connectivity. Business travel is not back, even if business class seats are being filled by the leisure travel. And that's changed the flows around the world. We saw in Europe, markets in Greece and Italy and Spain recovered ahead of other more financial markets, what we would consider as being the financial centers of the world. Traffic in the more leisure destinations came back. I think many of us in the room are familiar with what's going on in Florida right now. Traffic volumes in Florida have been well ahead of 2019 levels for a long time. I think Orlando announced last Saturday that they had the busiest day in their history last Saturday by about 6% over the previous busiest day. I mean, it's showing in congestion in the skies. Florida is struggling with the traffic volumes that are there, and weather events or rocket launches in that region, have a cascading effect throughout the system because of that. But we are certainly seeing congestion, and congestion during the peak travel months of the year is going to be another factor this year. Back to what you were saying about staffing challenges. I think it is a truism of the pandemic that those that showed scalability on the downside of the traffic curve struggled with scalability on the upside of the traffic curve. We've seen that in ground handling, we've seen that in some of the airlines and airport staff, and we are seeing announcements now for the coming summer of cuts to airline flight schedules and things like that in order to try and ensure some level of resilience in the system. But demand is exceeding to outstrip supply. And I don't think early in the pandemic many of us would have forecasted that we would be coming into an environment of recovery in as tight of a labor market as we did. I don't think many of us
I don't think so, yeah.
but we certainly did try to recover in a tight labor market where some of our jobs had lost their attractiveness, where it was hard to get staff, and our recovery has been hampered because of that, and it's disappointing to see it starting to play out for this coming summer again. You mentioned the impact of Ukraine. Certainly a major factor on traffic flows in the region. The closure of that airspace, the inaccessibility of Russian airspace to many airlines are having major impacts on traffic flows, and the bottlenecks that are occurring in that region are increasing flight hours in a way none of us hope to see because of our sustainability agenda. But flight times are getting longer. My hat goes off to air traffic controllers in countries like Armenia and Turkey and Bosnia and Serbia, who are experiencing significantly higher than 2019 traffic volumes because of the changes in the flows in that region. And as we see Asian traffic rebounding, and it's rebounding very quickly, flight numbers in the region are up 40% over October. Quite a rapid increase in that region. And as we see flights from Asia to Europe growing, the congestion as a result of the closure of airspace related to the Ukrainian war is going to get exacerbated. We did see, I think I saw in the news today, there is some trial balloons being floated about the United States potentially taking action on carriers that are operating through Russian airspace and stopping them from landing in the United States. That obviously will play out in lots of important ways if that does go ahead. But congestion in our skies is back as we struggle with the sustainability challenges and trying to make our skies work more efficiently for air traffic control. That's the sort of big impetus in the next few years, is trying to improve that efficiency. But while we did a lot of things right and used the time of the pandemic to advance a lot of discussions, we didn't advance discussions on our approach to congestion. That warrants some discussion, because it will be the challenge for us for the next few years.
Well, we're running out of time, so I'm going to run right to the longer term perspective, the sort of the 5-year perspective. You alluded to it a little bit. Do you see some light in that tunnel?
For us, the next 5 years is all going to be about sustainability. We always talk about the contribution that air traffic control can make to sustainability is small. We are always in the 6 to 8%, 6 to 10%, depending on whose roadmap you're looking at. But our contribution is now. Our impetus for us to get moving on what we can do to increase, cross-border flight efficiency, what we can do to increase continuous descent approaches, and what we can do to free route airspace, and what we can do to access military airspace with flexible use rules that are working well in many regions but still not used in others. That's the real impetus for us, because while we're 6 to 8% of the contribution between now and 2050, we're as much as 30% in the next 7 years, because delays in SAF production, delays in some of the new technologies that are coming, the technologies and methods and procedure changes that we can make to improve efficiency are largely ready now. We just need to deploy them at scale.
Okay, I have time for probably one more person to talk about 5 years. Who would like to do that? Who wants to butter me up?
Can I say something about that? 5 years.
Go.
I'm going to say, I know what they're going to say about 5 years. Safety, traffic, how do you accommodate it efficiently and safely, what do you need to do, the technology and all that. Okay. If the traveling public are here, that would be like jargon, lamentation, Why? Because we are victims of our own success. They expect safety. What you do to provide it is your business. They expect security. As far as the traveling public is concerned, it doesn't make a difference whether it is control flight into terrain or loss of control or a bomb on board. They expect to be moved safely and efficiently to where they're going. So what, from their perspective, we look from their views, what are our own challenges in the aviation industry? Is the dynamic consumer expectation. Always changing. Seamless travel. For me as a passenger, seamless travel or seamless journey means I book a flight, not on any website, on my bank website. The money is deducted, and then somehow an Uber driver or somebody comes to my house and I can give him my bag. And I don't see the bag until I get into the hotel. And whatever happens that requires that to happen is your business, whether it's ground handling or a new lettuce in the system that will make the things to work. That is the ultimate satisfaction, and nothing should happen to that bag. I should arrive safely at the cheapest cost.
Then you woke up.
And then, so the dynamic expectation. The second thing is the addressing that gap in public perception of what you do and how they perceive the final product. So safety is assured. If there is one accident, then there is a big problem. The airline is out of operation because of public reason. The third challenge is innovation for everyone, because in order to meet those requirements, you have to innovate. Not SBAS, not ADSB. For the traveling public, they don't care. They don't know what is going on. Contactless technology, biometrics, makes life easy, but then there will be issues of ethics, of privacy, and then there will be public pressure on the regulators to make changes. You are asking for regulation. ICAO cannot afford. They want to do safety, they want to do security. So who is going to regulate? They don't have the resources to do that. But yet you recognize the needs for regulation. So there will be different people you're talking to, even if you've got drone technology. How do you regulate with technology? What is the acceptable level of safety? Where do you fly to? If drones are being used cross-border, that raises different issues entirely. And these are people that don't go to the airport, they've never traveled before. They've taken advantage of aviation, and they will have questions from the society. Another challenge, what I would call extraneous factors. You talk about invasion of Ukraine or a conflict zone. The biggest challenge for our sector is national security. You can't discuss aviation security because it's part of national security, and they have a different perspective. If there is a missile launch, the Minister of Aviation has he cannot say a word about that. Nobody even consults him. We had a situation, you remember, Mr. President, the challenge in Crimea, and then we had the 5 countries in the Middle East, and then we had the Houthi rebel in Yemen. How do you fly? The public don't know. What is the capacity for us to handle those issues? Next to zero. No conflict, yet 75% of the airspace is dedicated to military use in a very big country. What is the Minister of Aviation or the Director General supposed to do? There are challenges we can handle. safety, efficiency again. But there are those challenges that we need to pay attention to. That I experience, but we still have to take care of them. Mr. President, these are the issues. How will ICAO continue to operate in that environment? How do you explain to people that are in the conflict that they should leave civil aviation infrastructure alone and not bomb an airport when the airport is necessary for delivery of humanitarian aid?
We're going to have to let the next panel answer that question. Please help me thank this panel for, I think, what was a very interesting discussion.
Continue our discussion about what already been said, and in the first panel, thank Angela for your support and work. Then I will ask to start, what are your expectations for this year and the following year? Egbert.
Thank you very much, and I'm honored to be here. I feel very glad that we can have this conversation. Going ahead, first, before I speak on the future, I just want to touch on the point of the handling agents. It is the weakest point in aviation and commercial aviation. I've always said that. And I know there are working papers that exist at the moment. But in Guyana, we are formalizing regulations for handling agents. That, at the moment, as I speak, it's on the desk of my Attorney General, who's overlooking that, because one, aviation has begun to blossom and boom in Guyana with the discovery of oil offshore. When in 2015 I had 3 helicopters to deal with, maybe 2 6-seater and 1 412. Now I have 18 large helicopters, the 135 18-seaters, etc. to deal with. So we're looking at aviation very seriously, and the ground handling is one of those areas. So the states are doing something about it. In relation to going forward, as Mr. President said, I wouldn't go into the normal things of what our challenges are, the high taxes which exist. And in the Caribbean right now, 6 out of 10 of American airline routes with the highest taxes are in the Caribbean, which is a disincentive for individuals to travel. A fare might cost, let's say, that base fare $35 or $55. But then there's a 75% add-on when it comes to various taxes added on. So I wouldn't touch on those areas. But Mr. President said we should possibly have a conversation outside.
Yeah.
What is happening with the boom that is taking place or will take place in aviation over the next couple of years? I don't think we can train enough people. I think ICAO stipulates over 480,000 people technical persons would be needed within the next 10 years or somewhere in that line. You cannot train them. I think we should start moving into a conversation outside, as Mr. President said. Let's start talking to the government in relation to infrastructure. Really increasing their expenditure on, be it roads and bridges. We cannot get everything, we cannot take everything. And maybe start looking at, I wouldn't say encouraging, but having individuals on short haul flights move to road transport, so that the services that we have at our disposal now can be dedicated to long haul transport. And the only way we can move into that area, encourage individuals, if the trip is 400 miles or 500 miles overland, have individuals start thinking of using the railway. This is, it's thought-provoking, but I'm just throwing it out here. This is what we should do, because we have a certain amount of aircraft personnel available to us right now. And as we look ahead, we will not meet the demands which are coming towards us over the next couple of years. So I find that engagement, I know it was said we should look at the economics of the travel. I think this is one area we should be looking into. I look forward to faster in the Caribbean, because it's terrible when it comes to connectivity in the Caribbean. I look forward to faster ferry boats, because the Caribbean are islands. Look at that kind of infrastructure, look at that kind of transport, and we should be trying to encourage the governments in those areas. Over the next 5 years, aviation will continue to climb. We've had all these, over the 10 years, we've had four instances where aviation kind of plateaued. We had 9/11, then we moved into a couple of years after to SARS. After that, the financial crisis, and it plateaued. But each time it plateaued during those crises, it sprung right up. And right now, we've just come out of COVID, and I can see the trend, and analysis has shown the trend will definitely be moving faster than it did in those other crises. So let us look outside of the block. I'll hold it.
Yeah, fantastic. Let's move to another part of the world, to Europe, and a different model. European Regional Airline Association, they do a great job. They have more than 50 airline members, if I'm not mistaken. Then what are the expectations for this year and the next year?
Okay, so looking at the short term, right, rather than the
first, and then we see the long term. Yeah.
Okay, it's very interesting the times we're living in Europe, because there's I feel there's some tension, quite a lot of tension between the regulatory agenda and the industry trying to recover. So there is a crazy agenda with the Commission, all these kind of regulations, especially on the sustainability arena, on the Fit for 55 and all that comes with it. And the industry trying to recover, and the regulations making it a bit more difficult for the airline industry in Europe, definitely. As I tell you, it's fascinating from an association perspective to try to be ahead of the game of what's coming next, and we see with great interest and some envy as well, as some other parts of the world are actually supporting their aviation industry. But this is why a panel like this is very interesting, because what I hear from you talk about modal shift for us is a cause of concern, especially for the regional airlines, because we hear more and more voices about shifting to rail, and we know it's not really realistic. Plus, we have a lot of question marks about the carbon payoff of investing in new rail infrastructure, deploying, building new rail lines, and also stock. But it's very interesting also this year from the perspective of the ICAC-EU dialogue. So I expect a lot from that dialogue. Therefore, again, feeding into the new regulations for aviation. On those, the topic is on wider sustainability. So you've got there economic sustainability, financial sustainability, social sustainability, and environmental sustainability. And everything is interlinked. For example, a kerosene tax. What effect does that have? Obviously in the finances, obviously in the social aspects as well, because some of the regions will be actually losing more than others. And this is why it's very, very interesting, because in Europe you need to have a majority, you need to have unanimity to introduce a tax. And then some of the countries that are not in favor of introducing the tax are actually being, traded with the kerosene tax. But how does the connectivity of those regions will be impacted, if a kerosene tax is introduced? Then the sustainable aviation fuel, so the debate about the ReFuelEU and how to make the sustainable aviation fuels available. That's not for the short term, but things need to happen quickly. Otherwise, they will not be available, and things need to happen. And then it was fascinating also to hear about the debate versus, what is more important that Mehmet was raising. So that's on the sustainability angle, the deployment of new technologies. There's some skepticism. Is it happening? It's not happening soon, but we need to take steps. There is a roadmap until 2050, but things need to happen already today, tomorrow, next year. In terms of the social aspects, obviously we touch upon that. The shortage of staff is key, and that's very much interlinked to the supply chain issues, because the shortage of staff does not only apply to the aviation industry, it applies to all our suppliers and the entire ecosystem, as we know. Easing border controls in Europe, again, we saw it during COVID. It was a mess. It was such a mess. And easing border controls is another objective. We need to make it flow, make it really easy for passengers. Digitalization, make the passenger experience easier. And it doesn't look like we're going in that direction. And maybe linked to what another person said about national security, I think. So. I feel like this year a lot is happening, and I feel like in the next few years perhaps we will see the results. But I'm a bit concerned that not always I feel like there is a proper impact assessment of, how is this going to? Because there's like too many things happening at the same time. It's like what is the final picture going to look like in a few years' time? So we will know. But there are many elements, and yes, it's very
challenging.
Yes, and troubling.
Well, Mauro, you represent the norm of connectivity. An alliance connects the dots all over the world, and with Mauro we are good friends for more than 20 years, and we made a book about alliances 15, 16 years ago. Then it's also a good friend, but you represent one of the more important alliances. Therefore, what are the main challenges? I mean, what are your expectations as a Sky team over the next year? You have already new member joined this month, actually, Virgin. Then how you say? Are you optimistic?
Yeah, I'm optimistic. First of all, for those of you who don't know Sky Team is an alliance of 20 airlines working together. There are 3 big alliances, and we are the second in terms of size. So from our point of view, from our point of observation, the 2023 is the road to recovery. we are not there yet. It's recovering. Premium traffic is back at a slightly different impression than what Michel was saying before. I think premium traffic is back. Corporate traffic, the global contract with corporate accounts, they haven't fully recovered yet, but that space has been covered by other incremental traffic coming from other sources, SMEs, individuals, professionals, etc. So it's quite encouraging. Sustainability is, I don't think there is any person on the previous panel or in this panel that has not mentioned the term sustainability. It's a fundamental thing, and we are doing something cool, which I hope I have a chance to explain if we have time. Asia is recovering, China is recovering. Domestic is basically back to normal, or in some countries more than 2019, and we're seeing profitability back, especially in the US. The US, the numbers are not going to be the numbers of 2019 yet, but solid profits made, mostly, not only, but mostly in the US. 2023. 2024 is, I think, we will see more business traffic back. We will see profitability being extended to other parts of the world, starting with Europe. The big carriers will be back. Consolidation will continue. Consolidation is already here today, but will continue in 2024. Sustainability will be even more center stage. You will see this coming up, ramping up year after year. And I think action in Africa on the map, India on the map, we've seen the recent aircraft orders there. Middle East, again on the map, we've seen the announcement about arriving out there. So I think from the positive side, this is what's going to happen. The challenges is an entirely different chapter.
Okay, well, I move to another area. We heard from the president about speaking outside from other industry, that also Egbert said. Then how we can do it? I mean, okay, we are talking about this, but we know we need to implement it. I mean, it's a very, I think it's a great initiative, and we talked also earlier, had a discussion then. How we can do this, because we talk between us, as someone said earlier. I mean, we talk between us, but we need to pass the message to the rest of the world. This industry is critical. Go back in 2010. You remember this volcanic eruption? Sorry, I cannot pronounce the name in Iceland. Volcano. But the thing is, all the sports of the world, CNN, everything was on aviation. And we lost this opportunity, as I said, because we were focused on the wrong reason. We saw the tree and forgot the forest. But the thing is, we need to find a way to pass the message to the rest of the world. Okay, as having a media, of course, I will do my part, but I am a B2B media. But we need to go to the B2C, to the customer, and this to pass the message. We saw what happened after COVID-19. Everyone jumped in and to take a flight, and I don't think they were thinking about the environmental impact or something. They were thinking that they got their lives back and they want to travel again, free, to feel free again, and to have holidays that they lost 1, 2, 3 years, depends on the region. Then, what you believe would be the way to pass the message to the rest? You are quite actively with Destination 2050 also. Then how you can pass all the messages to the industry, outside the industry?
I think there are things super interesting happening in the industry at the moment. It's just that maybe we just need to tell the story better. We've never been so great at telling how great aviation is, and it's always been the case, I think, and we still, because we know how great it is, but we just need to reinvent ourselves in the way we tell the outside world. This is why, when I hear all these new projects about electric aircraft, hydrogen or hybrid and hydrogen aircraft, and the eVTOLs, and all these new things happening in the technology area. I think, okay, the aircraft have improved tremendously in efficiency in the last years, but now this is a jump. This is a completely different story, and. this is why I'm a bit frustrated when I hear, well, it's not going to happen. Well, we just need to believe it. Leonardo da Vinci, no one believed that he was going to do it, and he did it. So we just need to invest in it. But it's money, it's money on the table, and then we need a taxonomy, because the taxonomy will give us the funds to be able to invest. And then there's some rumors taxonomy is not going to be on the table, and well, it will not happen unless we believe in it, and we as an industry, I think we do, but not necessarily everyone, even within the regulators, unfortunately. And the other thing is, this is a big challenge, but it's a beautiful challenge, and it will happen. And I think if we put it that way, if we say, decarbonizing aviation, isn't it amazing? I mean, can you imagine one day we fly net zero emissions? Really? Do you really imagine it? Because this would be like, short runway, then nothing, and then a short runway. It would be beautiful. So I think the story is very beautiful, but we need to convince the younger generations. And there are not so many. So I think that the matter is there's apprenticeships, programs, we talk about women in aviation, bringing more, make it more attractive to all the diverse talent that are out there. And we need to compete with other industries. But I look out there and I don't see pharmaceutical is more interesting than ours. It's just a different industry. If you look at other industries that are competing with ours, they're not necessarily better.
By the way, last month there was an article on the Google search, and then the search is about different jobs, and I was positively surprised that pilot is the number one. It's not an influencer, it's not a YouTuber, it's not...
We need pilots.
Then we need pilots, otherwise we don't have an industry. But I think that we are all together from different aspects of the air transport industry. Then we need to commit, we have to work together. Yeah, it might be a question of finance, but if we put a little bit of all of us, then we can make it happen, make our industry greater. Don't forget, we were successful on the environment. We were the first industry to commit, and the other followed.
Yeah, I strongly believe we need to speak to governments more. The government right now that handles the person or the private industries here, but don't forget that government eventually look at infrastructure, they have the last say, and they have a bigger purse. And we need to let them understand that a hospital bed is just as important as aviation, or aviation is just as important as a hospital bed. Because when governments sit down, when a cabinet sits down, and they look and they say, okay, I have to invest $10 million in aviation, either like in my country, the airdromes, I have over 120 airdromes, small airdromes. We're just a country of 83,000 square miles. And a lot of these airdromes are in the hinterland areas or rural areas. They're either grass strips or gravel strips. So what happens to an aircraft when it lands on the gravel or an unprepared airstrip? Damage takes place, it costs more to the operator to repair, maintain that aircraft. That operator is not going to absorb the cost. He passes it on to the customer, to the consumer. The responsibility for maintenance of the airdrome is that of the government. But I say to the government, we need to fix these airdromes. I have 2 hospitals that need 10 more beds. They prefer to put the money in the health industry. So it is a fight to get them to invest some money into maintaining airdromes, or even maybe opening a new technical institute which will eventually bring out technicians that could become engineers. So we need to have that conversation with the government. Show them out the pluses and the reasons why they need to spend money in aviation, because it's just as important as the hospitals. So the government is one of the first organizations or agencies or group that we need to have a serious conversation with, not just among ourselves as aviators.
Mauro. Yeah.
Just one
Okay.
small remark. The problem when you try to set up this kind of platforms, such as ministries of transport, they will come for the opening speech and leave. I think there is a problem too, in the sense that they do not take a side position as politicians and learn. They should learn and get aware of the challenges and have this humility that aviation is so changing. They can't always be a knowledge about the new technologies, the new ways of flying, the drone systems. So they're all kind of scared about embracing technology, scared about considering that cybersecurity is a revolution. You can now shut down an airplane from the house. You don't need to have this security tracks and complications. So this awareness is important. And get them sensitized to listen, to hear the professionals, and they are accountable to the young generation, but to the wider community.
You're correct in what you said. The politician is the politician. And they look at the population because they're asking for votes. I say to one of my ministers, I advised and I said, well, don't make this runway this long. This portion that you would spend money on, let's have some improved technology instrument landing system. What you have now can accommodate what you want, the type of aircraft you want. But you would get a response like, well, the people will see a longer runway. Well, I have to say, you need to improve the technology so an aircraft comes over, rather than the aircraft descending to 200 feet and does a misapproach. Maybe let's add some leading lights, and which could have that aircraft come down to 100 feet before making an instrument approach. So you will have less misapproaches. They won't leave and go someplace and then, use fuel. But the politician looks at, no, my people are going to see a longer runaway.
And especially when it is close to elections. Then we become even longer.
So that is why I said you need to have an engaged conversation. And it will take 1, 2, 3, but you have to keep pushing and pushing. But do not keep yourself out of the room, of the discussion room. Continue to push and push, and that is how sometimes we get things done in the Caribbean. I'm sure my dear friend and brother Nari would attest to that. This is how we get things. Constant bombardment until they feel tired and they say, okay, we'll do what you say. So that's one of the conversations outside that we must have.
As we approach at the end, are you optimistic for the future?
Cautiously optimistic.
Same.
I'm very optimistic for the future if we can have these conversations moving in a positive direction on the outside. Aviation is expanding and it's not going to decline. If even it hits a plateau, it's going to continue because Gone are the days when only the individual that works in the office could travel or had the means, financial means to travel. Now, the guy who's washing my car could travel. So accessibility and the ability to purchase a ticket. So there are more people. I just left India, we spent a week there last week. And there, if not, they have reached it already, but sometime by the end of this month, they'll be the most populous country. I had a flight which should have taken off on Saturday morning from Kanpur to Delhi, but then I suddenly got a call, sorry, your flight, you've been booked for the flight or the flight has been cancelled. Because there's such a demand that the agents now overbook. I don't know how much they overbook. Maybe a travel agent could tell me. Before I knew it was like 10%, but I'm sure now they're overbooking, especially like in populous countries like India, maybe overbooking maybe by 20%. Because the bottom line is the dollar. Don't worry if that passenger has to make a connection from this flight. So they'll overbook to make sure that they have full flights. So we can see the movement at this time, and it will continue to increase. So I am cautiously optimistic,
okay.
But I'm very, very optimistic once we can get the conversation going.
Well, applause the panel. Thank you for